Subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking the subscription button below. For future webinars and online short courses, please visit our website at australianwaterschool.com.au. Welcome to our 50th Australian Water School webinar brought to you by iSwarm. I think that's a champagne moment. 50 webinars? Well, maybe it's a good Aussie red wine. The webinars aim to capture big vision water projects. And that reminds me of a famous line by the Australian much-loved poet Banjo Paterson. They see the vision splendid. That's what he said. Great line, the vision splendid. Today we present another vision splendid on how to manage groundwater extraction. The topic is controlling groundwater through smart card machines, and it's by Dr. Effi Arnhaus in Germany. It's great to see you all here. My name's Trevor Pillar, National Partnerships Manager here at iSwarm and the chair of this webinar. And look, there's a lot of people joined us already and a lot more coming on board as we speak. You can see there, they're spread across the globe. We're so glad to have you join us. Thank you very much for taking the time today. We'll be less than an hour, but it'll be a very interesting hour. There's a whole lot of things coming up. I won't go through each one, but you can see there's a ton of free webinars between now and December, and then some online courses and some face-to-face courses. But you can get them by going onto our website or following us on Twitter, but I won't go through each one right now. But there's a big range of topics that the Australian Water School covers. The presenter is Effi Arnhaus. Dr. Effi Arnhaus is an agricultural economist with a focus on water resources management in development context. Her PhD, she conducted research on agricultural groundwater management in northwest China. Effi is currently employed as a research associate at the Center for International Development and Environmental Research at Gießen University, Germany. Effi's main research interest is on the role of local water use institutions in achieving sustainable agricultural development and food security. Welcome, Effi. So good to see you there.
Thank you.
It's late in the afternoon here, but I don't think it's late in the afternoon where you are. Where are you?
I'm in Germany.
Middle, Bavaria, north, south?
In the middle, I would say. I'm in the Frankfurt area.
Frankfurt area, that's all right. That's all good. We're so glad you've taken the time to this morning and it's like 5, 6 a.m. there at the moment. Look, we really appreciate you taking the time over this. It's excellent.
Today I will talk about the use of smart cut machines for groundwater control in China. So we have many applications of smart metering today around the world, and the question is whether it also provides a solution in a context of excessive groundwater exploitation by smallholder farmers, which we find in different regions in the world. I see also many people joined from India, where also excessive groundwater exploitation by smallholder farmers poses a big problem. So I will present 2 cases which are located in the northwest of China, where smart card machines have been installed over the last decade. And main questions of my study has been how have the machine been used to increase control over farmers' groundwater use, and also why did local authorities choose different regulatory instruments in the 2 cases. So here is a brief outline of my presentation. I will first introduce you a little bit to the background on China's groundwater use and management. Then I will present to you the study area, which is, as I said, located in the northwest of China in Heshi Corridor. Then I will present the 2 cases. One is the case of groundwater quotas in Minqin County, and the other of groundwater pricing mechanism in Guizhou County, both with the use of those smart card machines. Finally, I would like to briefly touch upon the outscaling potential of the technology on the one hand and the regulatory mechanisms on the other hand. So let's look here at the situation in China. I'm showing you here a table of the irrigated area in China, both including surface water and groundwater. Now here at the bottom we see a blue line which is basically represented the irrigated area in southern China, which is mainly surface water irrigated rice fields, which stayed rather stable over the last decades. Then if we look at the red line, this is northern China, where groundwater has become a major source of irrigation over the last decades. And also here, the irrigated area increased by 10 million hectares since the 1990s. Groundwater withdrawal for agriculture in China has has reached around 100 cubic kilometers by the year 2000, whereas it was still around 0 in the 1950s. This represents around 13% of the global groundwater withdrawal for irrigation. So, and this is mainly pumped by an estimated amount of 5 million wells owned by smallholder in northern part of China. So we can say that North China is one of the world's hotspots of excessive groundwater abstraction by smallholder farmers. So just a little bit about the situation in China. In China, the groundwater resources are officially owned by the state. However, as I said, the groundwater has been pumped by individual farmers or sometimes also by farmers collectively in small groups. However, for long, the state hardly got involved. This changed with the introduction of the revised water law of 2002. This revised water law says that there needs to be strict groundwater regulations by local authorities in regions of overdraft. It also requires a classification of groundwater development zones in unrestricted, restricted, and forbidden development zones. So although we have this law since 2002, there was no national policy directive on how to control groundwater use in these restricted or forbidden zones. Now, at the same time, in China and maybe also in other places of the world, there has been the development of an innovative technology for groundwater control, which is called SmartCut machines. Now, these machines include a volumetric water meter, and once it's installed on the pump, once the machine is installed on the pump, it can only be turned off with a magnetic card. And the smart machine basically provides that the pump turns off again when the water account on the card is depleted. So just for you, these are the basic building blocks on which the technology functions. But again, this technology does not describe how farmers' groundwater use is controlled. Say, under what conditions can the card be reloaded? So even with the use of this technology, local authorities still need to think, oh, what regulatory instrument they opt for. So my main research interest has been how have these two changes, the revised water law on the one hand, which provides local authorities an incentive to regulate groundwater use, and then the SmartCut machines as innovative technology on the other hand, which provides a technological solution to monitor and control farmers' groundwater use, which has been off the radar for a long time. How these two changes have led to local policy implementation. And what I find particularly interesting is what regulatory instruments have been chosen by local authorities and why, in combination with the SmartCut machines. So here is the map of my study area. I looked in two cases where SmartCut machines have been installed. Both cases are located in this part of China, which is in the northwest, and also part of the ancient Silk Road. So here, the reddish part are the Chilean mountain range, which is very high mountains, part of the Tibetan plateau, and the yellowish part here are deserts, partly sandy deserts. Now, in between the light green areas, these are the alluvial plains where irrigated agriculture is taking place. Now, my research took place in two downstream located counties. On the one hand, here in the east, it's Minchin County, and the other, and in the west, we have Guazhou County, and they, just for your understanding, they are approximately 500, 600 kilometers apart. So both counties are characterized by low levels of rainfall, semi-arid to arid, and access to both surface water and groundwater for irrigation. Now, my study on the use of SmartCut machines in both counties is based on a farm household survey and key informant interviews, which took place already some while ago in 2013 and 2014. The study focused on how household and village level water user institutions changed due to the new groundwater policies. Now, in both counties, the same technology was implemented. However, we see completely different situations in terms of groundwater control. So in Minchin County, the local authorities installed the smart card machines around the year 2009 and used the machines to implement a quota system. So what do we mean with a quota system? It means that each user is allocated a maximum amount of water which they are allowed to pump up. In theory, quotas can lead to water saving when they are set below prior water use. Now, if we look at the practical situation, what happened in terms of policy design and implementation, the quota has been based on a per capita, has been distributed per capita, per person. Every person has been allocated 1,200 cubic meter per year, this including both surface water and groundwater, and corresponds to 2.5 move irrigated area of low water intensive crops, which meant a reduction by 50% compared to the prior average irrigated area. I'm showing you here a picture of households, water use quota, water rights for the two seasons 2009 and 2010. Now, based on my study, I could not check to what extent farmers did indeed irrigate no more than the maximum amount of water that they were allocated. However, what I could say based on my study is that water use institutions changed. Farmers felt no longer free to decide when, how often, and how long to irrigate since the installation of the smart card machines. They need to ask permission and reload the card at the local water administration. Overall, this is also in line with the declining groundwater use trend. So 80% of the survey households reported that they reduced their groundwater use over the 2002-2012 10-year period. Now, why have the local authorities chosen to implement the smart card machine with quotas in Minchin? What has been the political process behind the implementation of the quotas in Minchin? So what we see is there has been a strong political pressure from the national government in this case, which also provided a lot of financial support to stop groundwater depletion in this area. There was also a very clear groundwater reduction target as part of a river basin management plan, which set a target to reduce groundwater abstraction from 600 million cubic meter per year to 200 cubic meter per year. 200 million cubic meter per year. Then the groundwater quotas were also part of a comprehensive approach, including well closure, distribution of well permits, and surface water transfer. So what we see on the image here is a closed well, which has been cut off the electricity with a Chinese sign of closure. Now let's look at the situation in Guazhou. Here also smart card machines were installed around the year 2007, and the machines were used to implement a tiered pricing system. Now, tiered pricing means that we have a volumetric water price with increasing rates at higher levels of consumption. So, in theory, the low prices secures a limited amount of water affordable to all users. For example, you have the first 100 cubic meter you can get for 1 cent per cubic meter, and then a high price stimulates water saving beyond the initial consumption block. So for example, we say after your first 100 cubic meter, you have to pay 10 cents per cubic meter. Now let's look at the design and implementation in practice in Guazhou. So from my survey, I found that the prices were set per well, and for the first 100,000 cubic meter pumped per well in a given year, the farmers had to pay 1 Chinese yuan cent per cubic meter. And beyond that first block, they had to pay 2 cubic UN cent per meter. So setting this pricing per well may be a practicable way of setting the price. However, our survey showed that there was no standardized well distribution, which means that farmers with more wells or a higher well density actually pay lower fees. At the same time, the 1 cent per cubic meter is a very low price. Yeah, for example, surface water in the area costs 10 times as much. This means that the farmers do not consider the price to be really prohibitive. On top of that, the pricing threshold, which should keep the water use below 100,000 cubic meter per well, is not actually known to the ordinary farmers. So it's not only a problem with policy design, but also with the implementation. Because well operators actually recalculate a fixed per hour rate combining different groundwater use costs, including this groundwater resource fee, operation and maintenance cost, and electricity costs. So we see that here there have been different flaws in the design and implementation of the pricing mechanism in Guangzhou. So yes, the fee is collected, the smart card machines are installed and functioning, but it does not provide an incentive to farmers to reduce their groundwater use. This is also in line with the perceived groundwater use trends. As reported by the farmers, 30% said that they actually increased their groundwater use over the 2003-2013 10-year period, and 40% said their groundwater use stayed unchanged over that period of time. So my thesis is that there have been quite a different reason why pricing has been implemented in Guangzhou, and it's not a full coincidence that it has been chosen when we look at the political context leading to this current situation. So yes, there is groundwater overdraft, and it's presented as the official reason why pricing policy is implemented. Yeah, without the revised water law and without overdraft given, the pricing would be some kind of illegal agricultural tax. However, there has been no clear groundwater reduction target formulated. And then when we look more closely at the situation, we see that the pricing reform coincided with a water administration reform, splitting up surface water and groundwater management within this particular county and river basin. So the administrative reform deprived the local government from its surface water revenue, which by then, from that moment onwards, were collected by the newly established river basin organization. And this may have been the reason why they started, why the local government started to engage proactively in groundwater measurements with the smart card machines and the tiered pricing system. So in this case, the political urgency to reduce farmers' groundwater use was lacking no pressure from the national governments, so that the policy was implemented without actually affecting farmers' groundwater use. Now, all in all, the two cases do not tell us much about the effectiveness of pricing and quota policies per se, since the quotas were implemented in a more stringent way than the pricing systems. However, it does show that the quotas are more likely to be chosen by local authorities in a situation where the political urgency to act is higher, while pricing may be driven by false incentive, at least in the Chinese context. So finally, I would like to spend a few words on the use of smart card machines and regulatory instruments beyond the two cases presented here. So first, if we look at the technology, smart metering, smart card machines. Is this a promising technology to regulate groundwater abstraction by smallholder farmers? I would like to highlight three conditions which led to the effective installation and control through the use of these machines, which may be lacking elsewhere. So both in Minchin and Guangzhou, there was a presence of a very powerful water administration, which could take over the responsibilities over the machines and the smart system behind it, particularly because there was also surface water irrigation in the area with the bureaucracy behind it. Also, in both cases, groundwater pumping was based on the electricity grid, which makes it rather easy to turn off the pump by cutting the power connection through the machine. This may be different when farmers use individual power resources like solar or diesel, as is spreading, as particularly solar worldwide. But even in China, we see that when the political pressure to tackle groundwater depletion, so political pressure in this case from the central government, the machine becomes empty shells. So even in China, where we have a centralized state combined with strong state present at decentralized level, the use of those machines do not one-to-one lead to more control over smallholder farmers' groundwater use. Now, it's important to know that the technology alone, of course, is not what counts, but also what regulatory instrument is chosen and how it's designed and implemented. So the question is whether the groundwater quota, as has been implemented in Minchin, can be transferred to other socioeconomic and political contexts. Again, I would like to highlight 3 aspects which need careful consideration. First, which is likely to be problematic in other contexts, is the procedure of setting the quota. In Minchin, the quotas were set through a top-down procedure based on a per capita distribution, which is very much like the distribution of land use rights in the 1970s and early 80s. In other countries, this method will definitely receive less acceptance, and other methods, such as negotiation platforms, need to be considered. Second, it needs to be kept in mind that the quota was not a standalone policy, and other supportive policies such as well closure and surface water transfer, which were also implemented, which altogether led to the reduction in groundwater use. Finally, I would like to point at what I think is a particular strength of the quota system in Minchin, is that it links both surface water and groundwater use and allows flexible distribution based on surface water availability on an annual basis. Okay, so all in all, I would say that the success of the quotas in Minchin were very context specific. Outscaling potential even within China may be doubtful. If we think of other political and socioeconomic contexts, the use of those smart cut machines, I think it's important not to think so much in a dichotomy of pricing and quota, but also in thinking of ways to combine both instruments. So, so far my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to your questions and comments. And yeah, if you want more detailed information, you can also read our policy paper published as a GRIP case profile, which can be downloaded on the IMI website.
That's a fantastic presentation, Effie. Thank you very much. It's such a wide and huge area you've covered in such a short space of time. I can't imagine what it was like researching it there in the northern part of China. My daughter spent 3 months there in her study years, and it was most interesting cycling through that area of the world. There are questions coming up, and that's good to see. Thank you, everybody. John, over to you.
That's a most excellent presentation, and I do congratulate you on the clarity with which you presented it. I suppose I'm interested, is this primarily driven at the county level? And I presume all this was a county in Gansu, was it?
Yes. Both counties were in Gansu.
That's right. I've had some involvement in Hebei, and it's very clear there that the surface water in the mountains was very much being appropriated by tree growers, with the result that there was much less recruitment to groundwater by the time water got down to the North China Plain. And that's been a major problem, and the North China Plain has been deteriorating for many years. How much wider do you see this technology being developed? And I had the impression also that it was actually very difficult to get hard figures. The Chinese Academy of Sciences could not get them without paying a lot of money to the relevant government department nationally, which I found quite an unconstructive approach to these things. So I was very impressed with the details you've had. So can you comment on how might be developing in other areas? Do you have a feel for that?
Yeah, so as I said, the technology of the smart cut machines, they started to develop it in China in the early 2000s, and they initially started in the eastern part of China, so also in the part where you've been active in Hebei, North China Plain. This is where they started to introduce and work with the smart card machines. And the western part of China, so where I did my research in Gansu, but even also further west in Xinjiang province, they were coming later. And what we see is actually maybe they came around 5 years later, that they learned from some difficulties in implementing and installing the machines in the east. So we see them also in other places in North China Plain, but they're the technology itself and also how to implement them have showed more difficulties than, and they have been upgraded, so to say, the technology as they have been started to be implemented in the West as well.
Can I go back to the issue of the allocation or the quota? I take it that the quota is not a saleable instrument in the sense that it is in Australia. So you can't actually sell your quota to your neighbour, so your neighbour has a double quota, for example.
No. So here we don't talk about, so this in the context of Minqin, it was not thought as a tradable groundwater quota. It was very much, and this also the quota is quite reduced per person, and in the end then they are recalculated per household. And the idea is very much that, okay, each household keeps having its basic basic livelihood, and there have been, let's say, pilots also with transferable water rights in China, but not within this context.
Thank you.
I appreciate those questions, John. It's been great. There's a couple more. Maybe stay on screen if you like, John, and that'll be good. You've had some experience in northern China. Yep, we've got a couple more questions coming up from Rob Richardson in Adelaide. He's with Hydrodis. How is the overdraft of an aquifer determined and then applied to the users? Interesting question, isn't it?
How has the overdraft of the groundwater been determined?
Yeah, that's it. And then applied, yeah.
Okay, so in Minqin, they basically made estimates. Yeah, so when they start introducing these policies, they made estimates based on the number of, based on the irrigated area and the crops grown. They made estimates how much groundwater has been abstracted based on the inflow from surface water. They have calculated what has been the overdraft.
Yeah, no, that's okay, because it did rise in my mind as you were speaking, how the quota allocation is made. Is this quota varied according to the aquifer capability? If I'm asking a simple question, I apologise, but it sounds similar to what Rob was saying just then.
Yeah, so yes, they made, so they had a river basin plan on a larger scale where they said they have to reduce the groundwater pumping, which was at a level of around 600 million cubic meter per year to 200 million cubic meter per year. Then they have had different policies to, so to say, reduce the groundwater use, and the quotas were one of them, also closing the wells. And I think they try to say, okay, the groundwater use need to be reduced by half, and this is how they came up with the quota.
Yep, no worries at all. Yep. Look, we'll keep going here. Raymond Minir in South Africa has said, any reported incidences of conflict with communities or small holders when the smart card machines are shut off and the water supply is shut off? And are there any measures to prevent damage and bypass of the smart card machine? It's an interesting community engagement question.
Yes. So the question is whether this has been the case, yeah, in China.
Yeah. Have they had incidences of conflict?
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. So, during the time that I've been there, of course, I mean, I asked the questions to the farmers, and they didn't show very happy faces. Yeah, when I started asking them questions about those smart cart machines, so it's definitely not been welcomed by the local farmers, although. Especially in the areas closer to the desert, they have had also this fear for the desert, yeah, because it's really sandy desert coming up, destroying the land. But yes, we are still in China. So, for example, I just tried to update myself a bit about the recent situation, and I saw there in Minqing County, I think last year, we found online that there was a 100-day action day against illegal pumping and destructing the machines. So there's pretty harsh punishment also going on against this type of conflicts.
Have you seen any changes in the crops that have been growing since this was introduced? Like, have they moved to more water efficient crops, which might have a better market value, or have you seen any changes in behaviour in terms of now they know what water they've got?
Yeah, so actually they were already before the policy was implemented, they were already they were growing a lot of melon, which actually is also already a cash crop and been sold to the southern part of China and uses quite a lot of water. And then there has been also a lot of government interference, so to say, with the crop choice and trying to steer the farmers to grow other crops, and also with the restrictions on groundwater control in Minqing County. They have basically reduced growing melon over the last 10 years, and therefore they came up with other crops. The government tried to introduce some costly crops like Chinese medicine, this kind of crops, like goji berries. I don't know if you might have heard of this. It's also trying to be sold elsewhere in the world as export product. However, the uptake by the farmers is, as far as I could see, was not very high, and they rather switched to say not that profitable crops like sunflowers, things like this.
Ali Hassani has said, what's the criteria for allocating water per capita? Is it based on the type of crops and the crop requirement? I think we got near that a moment ago.
Yes, so there is this 1200 cubic meter per person, and then they said this corresponds to about 2.5 mu, which is a Chinese area measure for area. And they said, okay, with this amount of water, you can grow low water intensity crops on 2.5 mu. Which include, so for example, what I said, sunflower or fennel and some other low water intensity crops, not melon, as what has been growing before a lot.
Right, yeah. There's a question here from Isabuk Job, a research assistant in Kenya, saying, do they consider the size of land irrigation when allocating the water per capita? I think we just answered that, and consider the type of crop. I think we did that. Is that right? And the possible cost of installing technology, is it included in the cost of water?
So the not installing the, I think installing the technology has not been included, as there has been a large subsidies by the central government, like a large amount of money which they invested in Minqing, and that's also why some other scholars also responding to the research I present, or the research I published, said, okay, this may be the case in Minqing, but it's such a costly way to reduce groundwater use that even within China, this cannot be repeated elsewhere. Well, I don't know whether it's true, because we see in Guaggio apparently also there the local government had the financial ways to install those machines. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, we're getting near the end of the questions now. Rob Richardson from Adelaide, Hydrodis in Adelaide, has said, how is the security of the card system maintained with regard to illegal trading of the card, perhaps even falsifying the card, but mainly black market trading?
Okay, so I have not heard of trading of the cards, or I think that the way of let's say resisting this technology has been on a more elementary level, like trying to destruct the machines, which then of course is more easy to find out by authorities once they come in and check. So I haven't heard of ways to manipulate the card system.
No worries. Carlos asks, how did you communicate with the farmers, directly or through translators? Was that an issue? But thanks so much for this excellent presentation. Carlos says he was very pleased with the presentation, but just wanted to know how you were doing the actual research on the ground.
Yeah, so actually I do speak Chinese, and I've also been, for example, I did the key informant interviews, I did them myself. However, the household surveys were done with a larger team of also Chinese students.
No, thank you. Well, we're coming to the end of our questions now. John, do you have any others that you'd like to ask or make comment about what we've been talking about? We really appreciate your background here and your work in research.
Could I just raise another issue? My impression is that the growers are using their quotas, and that the price is not really constricting in any way the amount of water that they're using. In other words, it is a physical constraint, not an economic constraint, leaving aside the fact that the installation has all been subsidised anyway. Is there also a subsidy on the 1 cent, as you called it, per cubic metre? It seems very cheap water to me, by at least our standards.
It's very cheap water, but I mean, this price is set by the government and collected by the government, who, except for installing the machines, do not actually have are not involved in any costs of the groundwater use. Yeah, the pumps, the electricity, this is all paid by the farmers. So this comes on top of this groundwater resource fee. So this 1 cent per cubic meter is only a way trying to make farmers save water. But indeed, it's a very low fee, which...
they won't have much effect if that's the case.
Yes, it doesn't have any effect. So we see that for some reason, the county, in Guaggio County, the local government has been very active in installing all the machines and implementing this pricing, but it didn't have any effect on a farmer's groundwater use. However, even if we say it's a low amount of money, altogether, it does provide a revenue to the local government.
This is good. This is great. Thanks very much for your involvement so much, John, and thanks very much for the work you've done here today, Effie. I think we might draw this to a close. I had one just rather big question. Early in your presentation, you talked about the 13% of global groundwater use in China. Is that like 13% of all groundwater around the world? Entire Earth's groundwater?
30% of the global ground withdrawal for irrigation.
So it's not 13% of the entire global. No, okay, that's a different figure. That's fine. And I just wanted to clarify just what that was. It was a big figure, but it wasn't so big when you compare it to how many are in China. It's a large country, a lot of people. Look, this has been fantastic. We could go on for a lot longer. There's a lot more people on the board, but I think we need to draw it to a close. But I appreciate so much your effort and your time today, Effie. It's been fantastic. Thanks for participating. That's the upcoming webinars for between now and December. And do follow us up on YouTube and on Twitter. You can see the details in the bottom of that screen there. Once again, thank you so much, and thank you to you, Effie, particularly for your effort and time in presenting this webinar today. We so appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
It's been great. See you again.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me for the webinar.
Been a great pleasure. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking the subscription button. For future webinars and online short courses, please visit our website at australianwaterschool.com.au.